Well, then let me just introduce Hugh Sinclair. Hugh, you can turn on. He's the, you've got a new title. What's your title, Hugh?
So I am the, good afternoon, everyone, by the way. My name is Hugh Sinclair. I am the Division Manager for Enterprise Asset Management at WSSC Water. We're a top 10 water wastewater utility located here in suburban Maryland.
And then also joining us is Chris Silke. He's from Portland, Oregon, Parks and Recreation. He's the Asset Management Program Manager. Well, we also have Kyle Wedberg, who's the Senior Manager for Research and Consulting at GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association. And it's through the Government Finance Officers Association that we were connected to the Michigan Infrastructure Council. So thank you, Kyle. We were going to have Michael Demers from Grant Thornton join us, but he was called away by a client. He will be joining us instead on Thursday at 3 this week. And stepping in for him will be Jim Dieter, the CEO of the Asset Leadership Network. And these are people who are familiar with the Asset Leadership Network, and we wanted them to watch what you were doing in Michigan and then continue the discussion. But before we get to, Hugh's going to start off with some statements. Before we get to that, I do want to ask Ryan, if he's still around, about choosing to take on the role of leader for this organization. He was a non-voting member and chose to take on leadership role, but he might have stepped away. We haven't built in bio breaks. So John, I had asked, oh, there you are.
Ryan's on. Before he does, can I say something about Ryan? Since
please,
I hired him. Ryan was a member representing the Public Service Commission, a regulator in the state of Michigan. And one day Ryan came up to me as chairman and he said, you know, you've really made a difference. This effort has made a difference. He said, I used to see everything in terms of loads, electrical loads, utility loads. He said, now, since I've been through this process with you these months, maybe years, I've thought of them about how as households. They're now households and families and people. And that's something that I quoted many times. And I said, when he applied for the job, I'm on Team Ryan because he said that. Because those of us that are involved in the delivery of utilities and essential life-keeping services know our audience are the people, are the individuals. And so Ryan is a great guy and we'd love to have him, and we're glad that he made the decision to move over from that other agency to the good side.
Jim Dieter wants us to really emphasize that asset management is not about assets, it's about people. So he would yeah. So Ryan, what made you decide to take on this role? It's a big role.
No, and I think John kind of led into some of my thought process and my evolution as kind of a public servant. But I think that he really hit the nail on the head. I was really involved in energy and I saw opportunities to improve quality of life of individuals, but I knew I was just scratching the surface. And once I knew how deep it could go, and I believe that the MIC Council really opened my eyes to that, is how much more opportunity there is to improve the quality of life outside of just electric and natural gas infrastructure, and to really look at how everything needs to come together to really accelerate that improvement of the quality of life of individuals. And I do look at myself as kind of a public servant. I realize that there's money elsewhere in private sector, but I really enjoy what I do. And I love stepping up for the citizens of my state every single day. I go to bed with a smile on my face, knowing I'm doing the best for every single one of them. So what John said is really like true to me. And I saw a unique opportunity to really make impacts and to make widespread impacts. I was kind of limited to my investor-owned utilities who do take up a large amount of the state, but I felt that I could do better for every citizen of Michigan. And this role really provided me that opportunity to step up and kind of put my time and my effort behind that cause and know that it was going in a good direction. And I had a ton of support. Like, there's no denying that the 9 voting members and the 9 non-voting members, we are a family. We all share this vision of prosperity and economic and personal prosperity within Michigan. And it was really, when you just sit there and you look at the momentum, the opportunity, the people, it was a no-brainer for me. All I needed to do was to get some buy-in from people like John. And I knew that, like, once I had stepped into this role, that I could accelerate and monumentally change the approach to infrastructure in the state. And within that, change people's lives, improve my neighbors' lives, my citizens, like the Michigan citizens' lives. And there was just, when I thought about, I probably got 30 to 40 more years left of my good working years, and there's no other cause that I'd rather commit them to. And that was just something that this job I knew was going to provide me the opportunity. I had absolutely no doubt in the time that I'd spent on the commission as a non-voting member. And like I said, when I saw the posting come across my desk, I just knew that it was where I was meant to be. And it was where that I was really going to be able to really leave my mark on the state and really make change for the better, and really improve every family, regardless of geographic location, fluency, or anything. I was going to provide them an opportunity to excel through policy decisions that I was going to be able to be at the ground floor for. And that just really, that motivates me daily. And that's just, I think, the best way that you can go into a job is being motivated daily just by the charge, the mission, and the goals of your organization. And I'm just so happy to be a part of the MIC because it just very much aligns with how I feel personally.
Excellent. I can't wait for there to be 49 others like you throughout the country, and 6 more in the territories.
Mike, it might be a little helpful to understand a little bit of context in that it's 2 years ago, last Thursday, Michigan recorded its first case of COVID. And so we did all of this without meeting together. And for a 2-year period, we had our first meeting back together last week. There was an abbreviated one, which was a kind of a hybrid of virtual. We also did it without a staff for a big part of that time. And so we have an active committee of people who are actually, they're doing the work. They're not assigning staff requirements and then coming back and getting reports. People like Aaron are taking huge leadership roles in this. In addition to, everybody has a day job, and every state departmental leader certainly has a big day job, but they're willing to commit to this. I had an
John,
yeah.
I'm not surprised you're an architect. You're applying the architectural art of problem solving to the problem of the entire state. And I really applaud that. And Aaron, through our connection with the Institute of Asset Management USA, we are aware that there is a Women in Asset Management group, and they have they highlight someone each time. If you're not familiar with that, we want to introduce you to them and have you be a strong part of that. How did you decide to continue doing this? Because like John was saying, you do have a day job, and this has got to be taking up a lot of your time.
I muted myself, sorry. It does take up, but it's really intertwined in all that we do as a regional council of governments, working with our transportation, our metropolitan planning organization that we manage. We do asset management for transportation. We are designated by the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration as a local economic development district. So we help communities receive EDA grants. We do a comprehensive economic development strategy, which is a regional economic development plan, and that makes our communities eligible for EDA funding. And much of that funding is for public infrastructure to support economic development. So your industrial parks, your skills trade centers. So we work with all those communities, and asset management is intertwined in all of it, and making sure that those investments go in the right spots to and really make the most sense. For example, you know, we have wastewater facilities that have excess capacity in some places, and in the community next door is maxed out on their capacity, and we have a manufacturer that wants to expand. Does it make sense to put $2 million to expand a facility when 10 miles down the road there's a facility that has existing capacity? And both communities are going to benefit from that, because they're going to have community, or it's citizens that cross jurisdictional boundaries for whatever they do, whether it's employment, whether it's shopping, you know, you name it. They are, the communities and the citizens of the communities don't see those jurisdictional boundaries.
Yeah.
So this is, again, this is also a passion of mine. You know, I grew up in West Michigan, and my staff is from here, and this makes sense for us to improve the communities. We're passionate about the communities we call home, and this is a better way to manage what we do.
Excellent. Thank you for that work. So Jim Dieter, I'd like you to start off by giving a quick assessment of what you've seen. What do you think?
No, that's awesome. Really good. You know, one thing I really struck me was that I've long been a student of organizations, and just from just hearing you all talk, it seems you're obviously an organization that cares more about giving credit than taking credit, which I think is a key foundational piece to success. So kudos to you all for that. But a couple thoughts really struck me at the, you know, at that kind of macro level. And really it is about being at the macro level. It's easy to get people to understand, and you alluded to it a bit with the legislators. People understand doing an inventory, knowing what we have, they get that. And, you know, often those of us in the asset management professions have blinders on, and we're only seeing the stuff in front of us and the operational aspects of it. But it really seems you have tied together very well the strategic, you know, and long-term 30-year plan. God, that's great. The strategic, you know, with the tactical information and other things, you know, down to the operational. Do you have any insights on, you know, how you went about doing that, or was that just a byproduct, or how'd that happen? Because nice job.
I think the majority, and I'll just speak for me, the majority of the input that we received as we went through this process was our boots on the ground, our people. And then there's a couple of messages here. We have to constantly remind people that the information that you need and the data that you need and the condition assessment that you need to operate a system are much different than what the state of Michigan needs. The state of Michigan would love to have everything. I have all of that porthole data, or all of that pilot data, in my computers here in my office with my GIS staff. We spent more time dumbing down that information to provide it to the state for what they needed, because we have it at the operational level. We know every valve, when it was last turned, every hydrant, when it was built, what it's made out of, every pipe, for 750,000 people. And the state doesn't need to know that. The state needs to know at the macro level what the condition is and how they can help those who are actually operating these systems to do better. That's a statement that's sometimes difficult for them to understand. We're from the state and we're here to help. How are you going to help us? I don't know. You know, so we have to work on that, because we have to work hard on that, don't we, Aaron and Ryan and Ian knows, because the people who are delivering the product and delivering the services are not the state government. They're the locals, and we have to represent the locals. And that's why we asked so many, what are your problems? What are your barriers? How can we do better? How can you work together? Regulatory agencies don't necessarily know that, especially at the operational levels. So I think as long as the leadership exists, which we are all, of course, term limited. I mean, you think about a 30-year strategy, our legislators last 6 years, our governor is 8. You know, I'm talking to a whole different group of people today than I started talking to when I started this. But we've made it through elections. We've made it through a shift from Republican to Democrat leadership at the governor's level. And it's keeping that long message going. Michigan's a mess, we'll admit it. This might not be right, we'll admit that. But it's going to be righter than doing nothing.
Hugh Sinclair is very familiar with the levels of service and asking
Sure he does.
people what's involved. Hugh, would you like to make some comments on what you've heard? And I don't need to ask you too much. We'll just go ahead, Hugh.
I think certainly from what I've seen, this seems to be the most integrated model at an enterprise level that I've heard of, right? And certainly in my involvement, I'm far more familiar in the water infrastructure space, but certainly that has its connectivity in all the infrastructure portfolios. But you certainly seem to have what would be a operational model and a working model that helps to solve what is some of the biggest challenges in asset management. Finding the synergy between the different needs that need to be decided and consolidated as pretty much a cohesive model going forward. And certainly I believe it seems that the advocacy that you've been able to capture from your governor's leadership, and then not only formalizing that through the council that you've been creating, but also utilizing the expertise going out into the local municipalities, certainly I believe is a model that should be replicated because, you know, we all understand even at the state level, most things are pretty much siloed because you have the DOT, you know, you have the environmental protection agencies that are there, right? You have everyone else really dealing with their own camp. And then the problem is all of these have competing interests. And certainly, Mike, I share with you the concern that at the time that we're making these historic investments, without really a replication of what they've done here in Michigan, I do believe that we stand the chance to have incoherence in terms of what are the actual collaborative priorities to get those outcomes that are there. Because for the average citizen, right, there is no difference between saying that there's money to fix stuff and the results of them seeing that that money is not being used efficiently. And I think even more than that, what I'm probably most impressed with is that how you guys went towards the basics. Because I think even just in creating what was a common language, which is usually the most challenging part of asset management, right? I think that certainly is so much so effective. And as well, I do believe that there seems to be the impetus here to go beyond where you are. And I certainly think that there's advantages to that because if we assess it, you know, most people, their interaction, even in infrastructure with the health for infrastructure is the ASC report card, right? Yeah. But then this allows you to take some action on the ASC report card in a collaborative manner. And I do believe that this is something that we should continue to champion and certainly try to replicate in a broader scale. I've certainly agree with our friend here that I've seen it in Canada and it works quite well there. And certainly that's something we should replicate here because we have the funds now, finally. Let's actually use it wisely.
So can I comment on Hugh's comments? Yeah, Hugh, I think it would be helpful for you. The Water Asset Management Council, which is a new stand-up, and it is chaired by Sue McCormick from Great Lakes Water Authority, who you will know, they're the largest water authority in the state of Michigan. And so Sue is running that committee and the resources of that committee. The TAMC, the Transportation Asset Management Council, is led by Joanna Johnson. When we started the 30-year strategy, I had to pick a subcommittee. So I picked, and I told them all this, busy people who are very involved with the work. So our subcommittee of the MIC working the work that started work on the 30-year strategy includes Sue McCormick from Great Lakes Water Authority, the TAMC chair, which is Joanna Johnson, me as the chair, the vice chair, the senior vice president of DTE in the state of Michigan, which is Detroit, used to be Detroit Edison, but the large utility, gas and water, private, or gas and electric, and Aaron, because of the Champions program and the self-assessments. So that committee of folks that are working represent our organizational chart, but also our busiest people. And when I asked the senior VP of Detroit Edison, or DTE, whether he would serve, his answer was, I can be on any committee in a regional level that I want to by position. I only want to be on the MIC. I only want to do this because it will make the most difference. And a person in a role like that, whose office is steps away from the chairman, it's certainly helped that he's representing private sector utility companies, so he can make those calls and say, hey, this is okay, jump on board.
I have one question, if I may, Mike.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to ask, right? So I know in asset management, we're usually pretty good at the long range view. I know that you've mentioned 30 years, right? But as you've alluded to, you've been through several iterations of changes in administration, but then also competing challenges with local jurisdictions and their, immediate priorities. Have you seen the need to have what would have been a shorter range or a subset of that plan that meets a more immediate window? And what is your update cycle for your 30-year strategy in terms of, do you routinely go in every couple of years and do an update on that based on what you see on the ground? And how do you manage that tension between, well, these are the things that are the priorities now, and those are the things that are 30 years out, and the disconnect sometimes between those two?
Well, we have that divided. Ian, do you want to talk about that, or Ryan, or one of you? We have the 30-year strategy with 5-year updates already planned and budgeted. Okay. Our goal, because we've only had one meeting, is to develop the 5 fastest hit low-hanging fruit that we can, understanding we're talking 6 governors from now. It isn't going to be right. We know that. But what are the aspirational goals? We're far more aspirational on everything that we do as we go out than we are on the short term identifying problems. If I can, in the time that I have left, solve the ability of multiple municipalities to work together to finance projects through different bond ratings and cooperation, I'm successful. Those are the short-term things. Let's change some legislation to allow different kinds of municipalities, different contracting standards, those kinds of things, and then deal with it over the time period. So
yeah, I want to kind of jump in on that too. We, we're just developing the 30-year strategy. We don't have one yet. So that's where we're going, and we're looking at the short term, the midterm, and the long term of what we can do. And we've been at this since 2016, and this, the Infrastructure Act that was just passed and this influx of money coming in, that is very short term. So we've been trying to balance that struggle of, John's gotten a lot of calls, I've gotten a lot of calls on, where's this money going to go? What can we do? What does the MIC think about where this money should go? And that's not really what we are trying to answer. We're letting the legislators and the local decision makers make that decision. But what we want to do is have that influence of where that money is going to make the most impact, and how can we do that? And how can we give the tools to the local infrastructure owners to be able to make those decisions? So, I think the self-assessment that Ian has helped us put together can really help create that culture and not only educating the people in leadership, but making sure we have the data in place and making sure we have the plans and policies in place and it's being followed, and the data that we can use to make those decisions. And the asset management self-assessment at the end spits out these spider charts that tells us where we're weak and where we're strong. So we as a MIC can then pour resources into those areas to help those communities. But that again is more of the longer term. But I think that's the balance we've been trying to juggle as we're up and running and we have this influx of dollars. But I don't know, Ryan or Ian or John, if you had to add.
I think the short-term, long-term question, Hugh, that you ask is one that comes up almost every day. When we first started and there was a transition from a Republican governor to a Democratic governor, and the governor actually ran, her motto was fix the damn roads.
You have roads over your dams?
Yeah, that was, yeah. So fix the damn roads. That was her thing. So almost immediately she came out with a potential for a 40-cent gas tax to fix the damn roads. Then the barrage of calls came to me, okay? And I answered all those calls by saying, that's a short-term solution. We're looking at long-term solutions. And our interest is changing the culture to asset management in the state. So we're not reacting to this 2 or 3 year problem. Call the governor's office. Don't talk to me about it. You know, that's her problem. That's not our problem. Mm-hmm. With the new money, everybody likes the new money. Whatever the new money is, you guys probably know more than I. But the anticipation of the new money that started early in the Biden administration, our response to that was almost the same. I wrote a letter signed by our co-chair of the MIC to every member of the Michigan Congressional Delegation and all of the legislator and the governor, and said, should new money come, we as a MIC support more investment in infrastructure. Our role is not, and underlined it, it is not to make decisions on where that money should go. That's someone else's decision. Our role is to help the state to make sure that asset management principles are used in determining where that money goes. And then when that money is delivered to the local units, that we are following the best practices we can to ensure those investments.
That's an excellent transition for to Chris Silke. As I said, Chris is basically the asset manager for the Parks and Recreation in Portland, Oregon. And he was part of a team to write an asset management policy for the entire city of Portland, Oregon that was so powerful, it could almost be an equity policy also. Hi, Chris, welcome. And if you could make some comments about what you've been hearing, and then let us know a little bit about your policy.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I just been listening for the last half hour or so. So I did miss the first part, but it's really fascinating. So as Mike said, my name is Chris Silke. I work for Portland Parks and Recreation in Oregon. I use he, him pronouns. But I am a son of Michigan. I grew up in Southeast Michigan, went to graduate school, had a fantastic interdisciplinary education that really set up a career in asset management for the last 20 years. Still have relatives in Romulus, Marquette, all over the state. So, and I get back to Michigan on occasion. So yeah, that's right. So it is encouraging hearing about this progress in Michigan. So yay.
Yeah.
So I just want to mention that the thoughts I'm expressing are my own, not necessarily those of the city of Portland or Portland Parks and Recreation. So I really like your last point though, because one aspect of asset management that I found is the most powerful with elected officials, and when they go out to their constituents and listen to their constituents, is to be able to say, we looked at everything comprehensively, and this is the best investment. And here's how we know. And to be able to show all the information transparently. You mentioned GIS, you can do it in a heat map, you can do it, in a bunch of different ways, bar graphs or whatever. And we've done that, and going out to the community and saying, here's where we're going to invest. In this case, it was some bond dollars, and it becomes defensible, and it's easy to sell a program of investment when you've taken that approach, especially when it's been informed from community engagement at the get-go in terms of criteria and priorities. So asset management gives you that. Recently, Mike mentioned we passed a citywide policy, and it just passed this last September. And it took us about 2 years to develop. Me and a few of my colleagues kind of hammered out, each word, and then vetted it through stakeholders, and basically it mandates asset management within the city of Portland for city departments. And then what's happened since then, and this is kind of new information, Mike, is we've been able to give a tour to elected officials and their key staff of some of the different types of infrastructure to really emphasize the point. And whether it's something in really good condition, that's a great example of best practices, or infrastructure that's been neglected, it was very eye-opening. And we're moving into that roadmap and how do we improve phase, which will include a maturity assessment, includes a funding assessment, levels of service, and so on. So that's kind of the trajectory we're on. Another selling point that I'll just mention for asset management is more and more grants and grant programs are requiring that kind of information. They're requiring benefit cost analyses. They're requiring, showing of alternatives analysis and things like that. So it definitely supports readiness for grant programs, all kinds of federal grants, and maybe even state grants. And I just found out, so we passed this policy, went on this tour, and I just found out today, actually, that we're going to get $15 million from the state for one of those assets that we gave a tour on, and is something that
Wonderful.
needs help. So that was really good news. So it does pay off.
What is the asset?
Columbia Pool is the name of it, and actually the business case supports reconstruction. So there will be a new North Portland pool, and yeah, so that's a really huge win, and just demonstrate the value of the program and being strategic, both in policy, strategy development, communications is a big part of it, of course, and I've heard you mention a lot about that. So a question I have for Aaron or John or whomever is, asset management kind of started with utilities, at least the municipal level in the US, and transportation kind of latched on. I think I only have like 5 peers in the country that I know of in the parks and rec industry who, are asset management professionals. It's their full-time job to advance it, within their program. But we manage the land. Like in Portland, we got 15% of the land area of the city, almost $2 billion in assets. So it's a lot. So I'm just planting a seed out there. Think about your regional parks jurisdictions and your municipal parks jurisdictions in this planning, not just for natural assets, but when you talk about centering people in asset management, parks are where the people are at. So.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about asset management, is that it's transferable across assets, and it really can be any asset. And that's another beauty of our self-assessment, is that it can be used for any type of asset, whether it's land, a building, you name it, airports, water ports. It can be utilized really for anything. And again, it's a consistent way to do that. One thing that John and I have said since 2016, since we've been working on this, is, it's taken us decades to get into the situation we're in with our infrastructure in this country. And it is going to take decades to get us out. This is not a quick fix. It's baby steps, and we are beginning to take baby steps. And when you look at the assessment, I tell communities, it's okay if you're not even a 0. if you're not a 1, it's just, we're starting. We have to start somewhere, and nobody's going to penalize you for doing that. Or being where you're at. It's a tool to show you where you are now, and how you get to the next level and setting goals. And that's the most important thing about it.
And I think on the kind of municipal and local government front as well, the volume and breadth of different services that you guys are delivering is mind-blowing. You know, you compare that to a private sector infrastructure owner and it's wild. You know, there's so many different things, and to do that, yeah, you have lots and lots of different kinds of assets that you're trying to manage to deliver that service and deliver that end value that you're trying to deliver. Certainly in Canada, we've seen a big surge on bringing natural assets into this asset management realm. So it's like, right, we exist as a local government or as a public infrastructure owner to deliver some sort of service to the community. Yes, we need infrastructure that we built to look after that, but there's a lot of natural assets that we are relying on to deliver that value as well, be it our water sources, our streams for stormwater management, all the land that we're using for our parks and things like that. Like there's a lot that we can do. And as Aaron was saying, like all the practices that we're talking about applies to any kind of assets, you know, whether we're talking about, you know, a tree or a building or an airport or a, you know, whatever it is, like it's the same principles that roll out. And that's why it's so exciting to be having these discussions at this kind of bigger perspective.
That's what the network is about. And just among the panel here, I can see the connections, and I am going to be introducing each of you, and I am hoping that Hugh will be introducing the MIC to the state of Maryland, and Chris will be sending his policy to Ryan. And this all sets up perfectly for Kyle Weidberg. Huh? I mean, he's just chomping at the bit to talk about this. So Kyle's with the Government Finance Officers Association, which is the entity that connected us. And so thank you, Kyle, and have at it.
Well, and this is thrilling. So thank you all for letting me be a part of this. And thank you to the MIC. I spend a lot of time talking to people who, Aaron, you were talking about this. They're in that to use the psychology term, the shame spiral, right? They didn't get handed something that works. They're managing something that doesn't work. They have the political pressures on them to deliver tomorrow, and they don't know where to start. And so, you know, as I listen to you guys, the parallel I would draw is in the 90s, an airplane went off the runway at Reagan, and all of the emergency vehicles arrive and no one can talk to each other. And they say, this is an intermodal communications problem that we have to solve. And they didn't. And then 9/11 happened. And the same thing comes to bear. And John, you said this earlier, and it struck me. You talk to the mayor, you talk to the governor, you talk to the county commissioners, and they say, how many pipes can burst? And they say none. And that's not realistic, right? How many lives can be lost before we take this seriously? None. That's not true. You know, we have pipes burst every day and all the time. And so that place where you started is we're all saying the same things and using different words. You know, the Tower of Babel moment where like we can't communicate, we can't talk, is striking to me. So that coming to a place where we're going to have infrastructure failures, how do we systemically come to a place where we have less, begins with us talking the same language. I'm really struck by a couple of things. That definitions piece, the dig once. I can't even tell you the frustration of watching new streets come up and watching old pipes get buried. You know, we did, when I was at the budget office for the city of Chicago, we did some work down this line, but there's just so many jurisdictions that overlay. If there is not a really good communication strategy, it's inevitable that you're going to be digging up new streets or burying old pipes. I really loved, Aaron, I think you said it, this idea of fiscal. So Michigan has this issue, Louisiana has this issue, Pennsylvania, with fiscal receivership, these communities that have become these new minimal communities that don't have capacity to do things. And I'm struck by, you know, in Louisiana, we had a community, Powhatan, and they were in receivership. They couldn't take on state grants anymore because they hadn't turned in their fiscals, because they were not paying the fees and the fines on state charges. And what was found is that for the price of literally less than a mile of pipe, they could flip their water system over to the community next door, which would have solved every single problem that was had. And just no one had the information or the conversation or the communication, even though those communities live next to each other. So that idea of having a better conversation from a regionalism standpoint, I think is vital. I'm also struck by the ESG, so this is a new fad. I don't want to say fad. It is a new, and it's the right thing to be doing. So that's underlying the right thing to be doing, but it is a self-reporting on the backside of debt versus thinking about it in the right way, which is the environmental, the social impact, and the governance decisions that are going into every project you guys just talked about. That's an easy discussion about self-reporting on the backside of debt when you've when you've buried that at the front end of all the projects you guys are working on. And so my question and the stewardship you guys are talking about is, I think it's unique nationally. And I know other people have asset management, but you've just so put yourself in a position where you're thinking about things longitudinally. It's actually really inspired. And that journey, to begin that journey, John, as you talked about, that's like exercise, right? It's like convincing someone to get on that treadmill the first time. And so my question to you is, what is the economic incentive you can provide for participation? I get that idea of unifying resources, the efficiency, the bond validation that comes from being able to speak in an ESG, or even the more resources that you can provide because you're doing work better from a state pot that is redistributing off the MIC. But how do you get them at the beginning? What is the carrot to go along with the stick of the governor said you had to?
Well, the governor really never said we had to. One of the things that I think we should point out is none of this stuff that we're doing is mandatory here. I mean, there are, at the current time, the only thing is the self-assessments were used as a tiebreaker for a grant project in our environmental quality department. That's the only thing. The rest of this stuff is people working together, and the business model that we use is just the savings. I mean, if you can save 15% on a construction project by combining the road work with the underground utilities and have some participation in that with the utilities, that's 15% of the project. If you can get to, in our urban areas, we have problems staging road projects. Where do you put it? Where do you put all the gear and all the stuff? Let's work together. And I think in Western Michigan, and Aaron and I know, and we've been doing that for a long time. I mean, we have road agencies that are building roads in cities that are letting one contract for multiple jurisdictions. A road commission is a unique kind of thing in Michigan, but we talked about it earlier, and it's the roads, handles all the roads and highways for everything outside of a city. We've been letting single bids in Western Michigan for salt and buying salt for Western Michigan delivered to the Detroit docks cheaper than Detroit can get it by building it and doing it together. I mean, that's a 10-year-old number, but I mean, so the cooperation and the collaboration, we just had a report last week from the Great Lakes Water Authority and Wayne County, which is Detroit. Wayne County was going to build a road. The Great Lakes Water Authority took the time to coordinate their construction project with the road, which was able to extend into Oakland County. So we have the city of Detroit and two counties working together to save millions of dollars because you're buying one excavating crew, you're letting one contract, you're dealing with all of those sorts of issues. And I think the triggers for us, part of it is responsibility. How many water main breaks is acceptable? The answer is none. Ian came over with some of his colleagues from Canada and met with a group of us for training. And we learned from like Windsor, she's almost embarrassed by her first asset management plan because it was 15 years ago and it was so bad. But if you wouldn't have done the first one, you couldn't have done the third one, right? And I made a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and I was in front of the city council, and I said, when my father died, I bought a park bench. Simple thing. It sits in your park. It sits in your park in Portland. How long are you responsible to maintain that park bench? It's a simple question. A lot of places don't have an answer for that. I had a city councilman who knows me really well said, well, John, we'll take care of it forever. And I was like, really? For that cost, you're going to perpetually care for my park bench with my dad's name on it? That's not possible. You can't do that. You know, and so, but those simple examples trigger people to think about asset management and responsibilities and long-term care that they don't think about if they're solving tomorrow's problems or buying a new fire truck. You know, it's a different set of thinking.
In the time remaining, I'd like Kyle, Hugh, and Chris to kind of talk about how we can move this forward from your perspectives. What can the network do? What can the Asset Leadership Network do to help share the incredible information that's being done in Michigan? And if you can think in terms of how what they're doing in Michigan should be replicated by the federal government, you can throw that in. We'll go in reverse order. Kyle, you want to go first this time?
Yeah, I've always been a fan of long-term CIP, linking it to a long-term financial plan. And I think Chris said it right. You know, this is a box that empowers and enables versus limits. When you come in as the next mayor or the next council and you have a plan, then you're substituting pieces and parts in and out of the plan versus coming up from tabula rasa and having all the political fights that go with it. When you link this into some sort of a master plan that comes from a planning background, it has the public voice built into it. So how do you guys take the concentric circles that you're working with and get that to that meta level? Because people are at all different places as they're starting. You know, John, you said it, the best day to plant a tree is 20 years ago. I mean, that there's no doubt. So how do you convince people to do it today?
Yeah, one of the things, and I'll tell you anyway, I meet monthly with all my mayors and city managers. And when we use the examples that Ian told us about long-term capital improvement planning, every one of them had an example of somebody running for public office because they were going to fix something new and cut a new ribbon, right? I mean, hell, at the city level, there isn't a whole lot of stuff if things are going well to complain about, right? So it's like they all had that. They all saw that. I stole that from Ian because it's something that everybody can identify with. That so you get elected and there's a 5-year capital improvement plan and everything's all laid out. We do it now with roads, with things have to be on demonstrative lists and things have to be prioritized. And you can't walk in here and into my office and get a road project funded out of our $130 million a year unless you've gone through the process. Well, it's the same thing, with these long-term capital. Let's solve this stuff now so we don't have to constantly fight over it every election cycle, which is happening every 2 years in the legislature here, and 2 to 4 in cities and townships. So that people can identify with that, right? They can identify with the bench. They can identify with the water main breaks. And so as we move out into these concentric circles, and for me, the MIC is here to help, and we're not the state. I don't work for the state. I can tell the state things the state doesn't want to hear, but I can, and we're taking the guide. We are working really hard to keep this local centric, not state centric.
And I want to add to that too, and how we're adding to that circle is through the champion program.
Yeah.
The graduates are nominating the new champions for the new round. So it's almost an honor as a graduate to be able to nominate somebody, and then it's an honor to be nominated to go through this program. And that was John's idea to do that, and it's really worked. And we had the program has been so successful. They get a certificate at the end. A couple of the graduates put it up on their LinkedIn page. Look at, I just finished this, and they were all excited. One of them got a new job because they finished the program. They were hired into a new job because they had that certificate.
And a couple got promotions inside with raises.
I've got to let Chris make his closing comment.
Thank you both.
I'll just be really quick. So first, the memorial benches. A few years ago, we put a time limit and we said you get it for 10 years. So I think
good
it's
job.
1,000, right? So we finally put a time limit on that. I would just like to add emphasis to what Aaron just said in professional development. And, you know, I struggle. So I have a small team. I've taught everyone on my team asset management. There's been no one coming out of university or school that has the skill set ready to go, you know, so you're kind of grabbing from industry, or, you know, someone who did something sort of parallel, and then I'm teaching a lot. Boy, I would love to have a diverse pool of applicants who, you know, had the skills right out of college and have a career pyramid for them. That would be fantastic. And then lastly, I would just add, you know, so there's these near-term tactical wins and political wins, but it's also about intergenerational equity. And where would we be today had these policies and programs been implemented decades ago? And what legacy do you want to leave, Madam Mayor, for the next generation? Do you want it to be, oh, wow, they really took a turn for financial responsibility in 2022 or 2023, and that was thanks to so-and-so. So it's about that long-term legacy also.
Hugh, that's a great transition into you.
I think what Chris said is certainly profound. I think really the impetus, I think that would drive the momentum for this going forward is that, you know, the U.S. and certainly the Americas had really been the champions of infrastructure through the development through the Second World War to building out the federal highway network, really pushing the envelope as to what does infrastructure development mean and how do you create a societal floor to which we build on, right? Unfortunately, the model that we built then was so much so focused on a space that had not emerged as yet. And since then, we have not necessarily created a philosophy as to how do we build and maintain on that, right? And certainly I lean into exactly what John had said, is that I think we really have to look on this thing a little bit more as a philosophy and not necessarily a decision maker, right? One of the things that, at least in my role internally, that took a long time to socialize for asset management is that we make recommendations, we don't make decisions, right? And that in itself allows the empowering of the stakeholders to then become owners of the principles of asset management. So I think in really the extension of this beyond where we are right now, certainly I think we're certainly in the most momentous time as to where this model should really have the catalyst to be dispersed. I think all stakeholders are looking to ensure that what we don't have is that in the next few years where they were asked as to where's the value of return on the investment that was made, that they can't really show in an empirical fashion that we've really made an impactful gain on where we are now, right? And asset management simply just comes down to the simple thing. You don't know what you don't know. So let's try to find out a way to know what we don't know so we can make a better decision than what we're doing right now.
We say that every day.
Jim Dieter, what do you think? What are you thinking about today?
I'm thinking all of us in asset management have an enormous responsibility. Whether it's at the national level and we see it at the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, where it really is bipartisan. You know, I mean, people do their yapping on their points, but in the end, it's a bipartisan effort. And in these very divisive times, you have been able to do the same thing in Michigan. And I think, you know, maybe this can be part of, you know, getting all of us beyond these divisive times and onto agreeing about important things that make a difference in the lives of everyone in Michigan and across the United States. So thank you all.
Oh, I would like to say just how blown away I am by everything that was presented today. And I want to do everything that we can do to help spread the word about what's Michigan is doing and infuse Michigan with what we know is doing well in Portland and Maryland and with Kyle. And by the way, everyone, Kyle's already working to talk with us next week to have the Michigan Infrastructure Council present at the Government Finance Officers Association. So the network is going forward. But then we also have to work together to figure out who do we present this to in the federal government. It's past the legislative stage. So how can we bring John and Ryan and Aaron and Hugh and Chris to the federal agencies? And we'll work on that. We're looking for any examples or any ideas on how to make that go forward. And I'm just so happy to be part of this movement, because it is an asset management movement, and everybody else brings problems to the table, and this group of people are bringing solutions. And thank you to Michigan for having a workable solution that people can say, all right, it takes a while, but we can do that. And Aaron, it's not a baby step. You have made a huge mountainous step, and thank you for what you've done.